Greetings, dear friends and philosophers, and those just beginning to explore. I know how difficult it can be to begin studying a new discipline, and so many of you are wondering where to begin, what books to consider. In this video, I'd like to present you my list of the most influential philosophers who have made a historic contribution to the development of philosophy and are worthy of attention. Of course, choosing just 10 of the most influential books in a discipline like philosophy is very difficult, especially one steeped in over 2,500 years of written tradition, but I've tried. Before we begin, I need to make a few important reservations. First, I've begun to include in this ranking at least one or more textbooks that introduce schools and ideas that, whether by chance or through their very similarity to nature, make the most significant contribution to the development of history and philosophy. Furthermore, I tried to avoid including more than two books by a single author, and the defendants focused on two major works that present the author's core ideas. Otherwise, at least half of this list could have been composed of works by Plato and Aristotle alone. It's worth noting that this video focuses specifically on books that have influenced Western philosophy. Eastern philosophy will not be included in this list, as is customary to consider Eastern and Western philosophical traditions separately. The books are not arranged in order of importance, as even identifying the 10 most influential books would be very difficult, let alone ranking them in order of importance. Instead, this book is presented chronologically from earliest to most recent. Book number 1, Ecclesiastes. One of the wisest and most influential books in the history of human thought. According to legend and religious tradition, authorship is attributed to the famous King Solomon, one of the wisest men who ever lived. Who wrote it isn't so important, but what is written in this book is important. The book is small in size but immense in meaning. It mainly contains a list of aphorisms that briefly and clearly convey the essence of human life. I recommend it to anyone who hasn't read it yet. Number 2, Plato's Dialogue, Parmenides. It's considered Plato's most difficult dialogue to read, but also one of the most important. The dialogue examines the dichotomy of the one and the many. This debate arose in the early period of ancient philosophy. Some argued that the one was the cause of all existence. Others argued that the many were the cause of all existence. Each of these versions has its advantages and disadvantages, which are vividly illustrated in the Parmenides. Book number 3, The Republic. Without a doubt, one of the most influential philosophical works of all time. The book describes the relationship between the individual and society, the state, types of government such as democracy, oligarchy, aristocracy, tyranny, monarchy, and ochlocracy, the theory of the founding and development of the state, the theory of wars, and more. Book number 4, Metaphysics by Aristotle. One of Aristotle's most fundamental philosophical works. The book isn't a complete, well-organized text, but rather fragmentary notes, thoughts that Aristotle likely wrote down to avoid forgetting. It explores metaphysical questions such as, what is the primary cause of all existence, or how does spirit differ from matter, and others. It's a difficult read, and its contents shouldn't be taken as definitive. Rather, it's a good stimulus for personal reflection. It's not for everyone, but if you're interested in that sort of thing, you definitely need to read it. Book number 5, Nichomachean Ethics. Nichomachean Ethics is perhaps the most important treatise in its discipline, ethics. Ethics, for those unfamiliar, is a branch of philosophy concerned with human nature and behavior. This book is required reading for anyone interested in philosophy. Although written 2,500 years ago, it remains as relevant today as ever because it's about humanity, and humanity as it was in ancient Greece remains the same today in the modern world. Book number 6, The Gospels. The main books of Christianity, which describes the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. There are 4 of them, Matthew, Luke, Mark, and John, which are included in the biblical canon, and can be found in any Bible book you buy at a store or market. Yes, for those who didn't know, the Bible isn't a single book, but a collection of over 50 different books, divided into the Old and New Testaments. All 4 Gospels tell the same story of Christ's life and teachings, with only minor differences, as they were written by different people, his disciples, based on their own recollections. Every person on earth who has watched certain films, read certain books, or heard certain proverbs is at least partially familiar with the contents of the Gospels, and some may not even realize it. Book number 7, The Consolation of Philosophy by Boetius, a landmark work by the medieval philosopher Boetius written in prison before his execution. According to the plot, a woman appears to Boetius in captivity, calling herself Philosophy, seeking to converse with him and assuage his sorrows. The book is filled with reflections on the difficult fate of philosophers and thinkers and the search for purpose. It's no secret that many thinkers throughout history have been reviled by society and persecuted by the authorities. Socrates, Galileo, and Bruno are the most famous of them. So what's the point of being a philosopher if it doesn't bring any earthly reward? This is precisely what the consolation of philosophy is about. Book number 8, The Mathematical Principles of Newton's Philosophy. The influence of Newton's discoveries cannot be overstated. This book ushered in an entire era in all areas of human life, which to some extent continues to this day. Under the influence of Newton's physics, philosophy was firmly and permanently swept by the positivist movement. This treatise may not be required reading, but its role in the history of science and humanity is worth knowing. Book number 9, Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. Critique of Pure Reason. Another radical shift in philosophy came with Emmanuel Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. One of the most difficult books in philosophy to read, it strikes at the very heart of metaphysics, a field long considered the most important in philosophy. Metaphysics has yet to recover from this blow, and the scope considered central to philosophy for centuries and millennia has virtually disappeared from serious philosophical discourse today, and finding a specialist in metaphysics even in philosophy departments is difficult. Book number 10, The Capital by Karl Marx. The Capital. Of course, it's impossible not to include Karl Marx's most famous work on this list, which formed the foundation of the communist movement that left such a mark on history. Marx wasn't the first to conceive of the concept of materialism, and perhaps wasn't the most profound exponent of this school, but it was Marx's Capital that was destined to become one of the most influential works of humanity, perfectly fitting into the fashion of its time and the historical and social context of the era. These are my top 10 most influential books on the history of philosophy. Which books would you include on this list? Share your thoughts in the comments.